Trump's worst fear is becoming reality. India, the nation Washington once counted on to counterbalance China, has just taken a dramatic step closer to Beijing. After a high-profile meeting with China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi, New Delhi is signaling something few imagined possible: a willingness to work with China more closely than with the United States. For Donald Trump, this cuts at the core of his foreign policy vision. Tariffs were supposed to isolate Beijing and bind U.S. allies tighter to Washington. Instead, the global landscape is shifting under his feet. While Trump boasts about America winning, China has quietly built something much larger. Across the global south, Beijing has woven together a $1.6 trillion trade network. From Africa to Latin America, Chinese factories, loans, and investments are not just moving goods. They are shaping the future of technology and growth. And now, with India leaning toward Beijing, the question is unavoidable. What happens to America's role at the top of the world order? Stay tuned, because what may look like an ordinary diplomatic visit could, in fact, be the turning point of a new global era. What just happened in New Delhi is not routine diplomacy. It could redefine Asia's balance of power. For the first time in over 3 years, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi set foot in India. On the surface, it looks like a simple visit. In reality, it's a signal that the rules of the game are starting to change. For decades, India and China have stood on opposite sides. Their story is one of war in 1962, deadly border clashes in 2020, and years of hostility that froze ties. India banned Chinese apps, blocked investments, and leaned closer to Washington, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi even cultivating a personal bond with Donald Trump. But this visit suggests a new chapter. Channels that were once locked shut are reopening. Direct flights are preparing to resume. Beijing has lifted curbs on key fertilizer ingredients that India's farmers cannot do without. And talks are quietly beginning on border trade routes long left dormant. Wang Yi isn't just making a courtesy call, he's offering partnership instead of rivalry. For Washington, this is a nightmare. The India-China divide was one of America's strongest cards in Asia. It allowed the U.S. to pull New Delhi into alliances like the Quad and build a counterweight to Beijing. If that wedge closes, America's influence in the region shrinks dramatically. Why now? The answer points back to Trump's own strategy. His foreign policy was built on pressure. Tariffs slapped on allies and enemies alike, restrictions on trade, and ultimatums dressed up as diplomacy. India played along for a while. Modi leaned into the Quad with the US, Japan, and Australia. Washington cheered, convinced India would always be its reliable partner. But when the US demanded India cut off Russian oil, the illusion cracked. For India, energy security is sacred. Cheap Russian crude kept prices under control for over 1 billion people. Abandoning it would have meant economic chaos. New Delhi said no. And instead of treating India as an equal, Washington responded with threats of sanctions and lectures about loyalty. That miscalculation gave Beijing its opening. Wang Yi arrived offering what Washington would not: respect and cooperation. Reopened flights, eased trade, confidence-building steps. India's positive response shows it refuses to be treated as anyone's pawn, not America's, not China's. Of course, deep mistrust remains. Border disputes still fester, and competition is real. But the signal is unmistakable. India will chart its own path. And the fact that China and India are talking again, after years of hostility, marks a moment that could reshape the entire Asian order. To grasp the real weight of Wang Yi's visit, you have to zoom out. What happens if Asia's two giants, India and China, decide to move closer together? The answer is simple and devastating for Washington. America's influence takes a massive hit. Think about BRICS. For years, its biggest weakness was the mistrust between New Delhi and Beijing. That rift stopped the group from becoming a true counterbalance to the Western-led G7. But if India and China manage to narrow that divide, even slightly, the equation changes overnight. With Russia supplying energy, Brazil delivering food, and South Africa bringing minerals, BRICS could transform into a heavyweight bloc powerful enough to challenge U.S. dominance directly. And the first signs are already here. Despite border clashes and political hostility, trade between India and China still tops $135 billion every year. Imagine what happens if restrictions ease, if border routes through the Himalayas reopen, or if long-term infrastructure deals take shape. Even small steps would send a signal. The ice is breaking. That's why Wang Yi's stop in New Delhi matters so much. It isn't only about borders. It's about testing whether India is ready to act less like America's junior partner and more like an independent power, balancing between Washington, Moscow, and Beijing on its own terms. And once again, Trump himself has played into this shift. His heavy use of tariffs, his dismissive tone toward allies, and his demands for obedience have backfired. Instead of isolating China, he's pushed countries like India to rethink their loyalties. Instead of weakening BRICS, his policies have given it new momentum. Where could this lead? If India and China deepen their dialogue, we could see a surge in bilateral trade, new infrastructure links, and a far more unified BRICS. Across the global south, governments watching this shift might feel emboldened to resist American pressure, knowing they're not alone. So what looks like a routine diplomatic meeting may actually be the start of a global realignment. Two of Asia's most powerful nations, once bitter rivals, are reopening channels just as Washington's pressure tactics reach their breaking point. And the lesson is clear. America's old playbook, built on tariffs, threats, and demands for loyalty, no longer works. The world is moving on. And when a nation as large and decisive as India decides to tilt the balance, the entire global order begins to shake. To understand the true scale of what's happening, we have to widen the lens. The thaw between India and China is just one piece of a much bigger story. Beijing's quiet pivot to the global south. And the numbers behind it are staggering. China now exports around $1.6 trillion worth of goods every year to developing nations. That's not just more than it sells to the US and Europe combined. It's a complete reversal of the old world order. For decades, analysts swore that China's economy was chained to Western consumers. They argued that without American and European markets, Beijing would stumble. Today, the opposite is true. The global south has become China's lifeline, its most important customer base. How did this transformation happen? Ironically, the roots go back to Washington. Donald Trump believed tariffs would choke off China's exports and force Beijing into submission. Instead, they forced China to look elsewhere, and what it built was far bigger than anyone in Washington anticipated. China fanned out across Africa, pouring money into ports, roads, and railways. It invested billions in Latin America, locked in energy deals across the Middle East, and stitched together the Belt and Road Initiative, a vast network of infrastructure and digital highways binding dozens of countries directly into China's supply chain. The result? A new trade map where Beijing, not Washington, is the preferred partner in Nairobi, São Paulo, Riyadh, and Jakarta. And exports are only half the picture. For the first time in history, Chinese companies are now investing more money abroad than inside their own country. Last year, those outflows even surpassed US foreign investment. That milestone is a flashing red sign. China is no longer just an export powerhouse. It's embedding itself into the economies of the global south, permanently. Factories, power plants, ports, 5G networks, solar farms, lithium mines, Beijing is planting its flag in every strategic sector. These aren't just business deals. They're chess moves designed to build influence, create dependency, and lock in alliances that Washington's tariffs can't touch. And here's the great irony. The more America tried to isolate China, the faster this pivot accelerated. Tariffs were supposed to corner Beijing. Instead, they pushed it to expand, diversify, and entrench itself deeper across the global south, creating a sphere of influence that now rivals the West itself. If there's one industry that captures this seismic shift in power, it's electric vehicles. In just a decade, China has built the largest EV industry on the planet. Today, more than 60% of all electric cars sold worldwide come from Chinese factories. But Beijing isn't content with home dominance anymore. Its automakers are going global, fast. For the first time ever, Chinese EV companies are investing more abroad than at home. Entire factories are rising across Europe. Distribution hubs are spreading through Southeast Asia. And in Africa and Latin America, affordable Chinese EVs are flooding the roads, undercutting Western rivals and reshaping markets. This is not just trade. This is strategy. Beijing's new Going Global play is about embedding Chinese companies directly into foreign economies, where they create jobs, build infrastructure, and lock in long-term influence. Why does it matter so much? First, EVs are the future of transportation. Whoever dominates EVs will dominate the auto industry for decades. And right now, China holds the crown. Western carmakers are drowning in high costs and slower production, while Chinese firms are scaling at record speed, backed by deep state subsidies and near-total control of supply chains. Second, EVs depend on critical minerals, lithium, cobalt, nickel, resources that overwhelmingly lie in the global south. By expanding into these regions, China isn't just selling cars. It's securing the raw materials that power the entire industry. Control the resources, control the technology, and ultimately, you control the future. Third, each factory built overseas rewires politics. When Brazil or Thailand hosts a Chinese EV plant, it gains more than jobs. It becomes tied to Beijing's success. Its growth, its employment, its technology pipeline, all depend on China. That creates influence no tariff or lecture from Washington can erase. Put together, the picture is clear. Trump's tariff war has backfired. Instead of isolating China, it pushed Beijing to accelerate outward, into markets where America has little leverage and into industries that define tomorrow's economy. So when Wang Yi steps onto Indian soil, when flights reopen and border trade resumes, it's not just about two rivals finding common ground. It's the opening act of a larger transformation, where the global south aligns with China and the old American-led order starts to fade. The question now is simple but dangerous. Will the US adapt to this reality, or will it be left watching as others write the rules of the future? Stay tuned, because what comes next could reshape the global economy in ways we've never seen before.